So here's a really fun topic that I'm excited that we're going into, this topic of longevity. And what I will tell you is that I sat with the word anti-aging for a really long time. And I thought, why do we hate aging so much that we had to put the word anti in front of it? And then we had to create a whole industry around people who are going to make you fear aging and stop aging. Yet every day, every second, we are aging. So I want to start off with, can you help us understand the difference between aging and longevity? And what is actually happening to us? This is a deeper question on a cellular level as our body starts to move into these older states.
Yeah. Well, I love the question. Let me start off with this. You were talking about social media. I did a social media post here on Instagram not too long ago, and I said, here are the top foods to eat to live to 120. And you know, the most common question, the response I got was, I don't want to live to be 120.
Yes.
And it caught me a little bit off guard, but then I sat there and understood it because like I had a grandmother who was going through Alzheimer's, and seeing what that was like. And then so many people become feeble or on multiple medications and are so sick and suffering when they get to a certain point in life, and think, well, if aging is about suffering and getting older is about suffering, that doesn't sound like something I want to be sold or something I want. Versus, I was really blessed to go on a trip to Asia here. This was quite a few years ago. But I was so blown away by, one of the things they would do is they would go out in the streets. They would typically take two hours for lunch. And where I was in China, they would go out and they would do Tai Chi in the afternoons or right around lunch. And there were a number of people over 100 years old. I said, how old is that woman? How old is that man? 104, 106. And I'm like, and they're still being this active. And that was really, really incredible. And so, and then here's another thing, and I'll kind of touch on this here real quick, and then I'll get into this longevity idea. But, I had a major health issue about 3 years ago where I almost died. And it really caused me to spend the last 3 to 4 years focusing almost solely on longevity and healing. And when you look at the medical literature today, the number keeps going up. There were 9 hallmarks of aging, then 12, then someone's like 15. But there are many hallmarks of aging in functional or Western medicine today. But let me hit on Eastern medicine first before I go back when it ties into longevity. Yeah. When you look at Chinese medicine, longevity is tied to what they call the 3 treasures. And they call that Shen, Qi, and Jing. Okay? Shen is tied to your spiritual health. Qi is tied to your cellular health, your ATP. They would call it breath. And then Jing is tied to, they would tie it to your DNA, your actual physicality, your physical body. And it's really tied to sperm, to the egg, to your bone marrow, your stem cells are a prime example of what they would call that. And then there's this saying in Chinese medicine, to prolong life, protect the 3 treasures. Okay. And so they believe really building health, sort of this in terms of the mental, spiritual side, the physical, the mental side and the physical side are the keys to longevity. And one of the things that I really noticed in my practice over the years is that, a lot of people are sick because they have childhood trauma. They have a lot of negative thinking. They might be living with unforgiveness or fear or worry. And these actually affect our organ systems and make them sick. And then also there's an element of, like we talked about, sort of a mind-body connection. And then, of course, eating a poor diet, that ages us as well. And then when we look at the 9 hallmarks of aging, or let me just hit on some of the hallmarks, because there's just a lot to get through. But, I think that some of the big ones for me is, one is imbalancing your circadian rhythms. When we're not living in tune with nature, that ages us. And that really sort of kicks off a neuroendocrine response where cortisol gets too high, or at least it's fluctuating incorrectly which is affecting melatonin. And cortisol is kind of this master hormone where cortisol gets high, well, now insulin gets high. Well, insulin's high. Now there's an estrogen issue, and then that can lead to thyroid hormone issues later on, and you know this as well as anybody and teach on this. But I think that circadian rhythms being off, that is a major hallmark of aging. Another one would be microbiome dysbiosis. Your gut gets off. That's causing an aging issue. And what's connected to the gut, I'm going to hit on just two others because I know we can dive into this stuff as we go on. But sort of our immune system, and so we see these senescent cells building up. But one of the biggest signs of us aging is something called immunosenescence, where we have too many of these senescent cells, which are zombie cells, which are very inflammatory if they're left in the body. They're kind of dead cells, is why they're called that. And then the last one would be, I'll hit on here quickly, is stem cell exhaustion. We don't have stem cells enough to regenerate and heal. And stem cells are those tissues that if you have an area of injury or you're aging, let's say you get a sunburn or anything happens that's sort of negative to where there's destruction of cells in your body, stem cells are created to help regenerate, heal, and repair the body. And when those stem cells get exhausted in your body and you don't have enough of them, you don't heal as well. And that's something people may notice if they're aging too quickly or if they have an injury, it doesn't heal as well. And of course, this always happens as we age to a degree, but sometimes more quickly than it should happen. And so those are some of those big signs of aging. But again, there's about 9 to 15 hallmarks in Western medicine. There's 3 hallmarks of aging when it comes to ancient medicine, like in Japan and Asia. But those are some things people need to be aware of when it comes to longevity and aging.